name isn't important. What matters is what I'm about to confess. I was a poor boy. I only studied till 12th, and after that, I couldn't find any job. My family struggled with poverty, yet I felt ashamed to do hard labor. Days went by in frustration, and nights were filled with fear about the future. Everything changed the day I met a man people called Preceptor, a well-known thief in our area. He didn't give lectures, he didn't ask questions, he simply said, "If you want money, follow me." And I did. We would steal livestock, household items, anything we could get our hands on. At night, we moved silently. Before sunrise, the world forgot we were ever there. Soon, we became the most notorious thieves in the area. People feared us, but we felt proud. Until one day, a medical college professor approached us with a strange request. He didn't want money stolen. He wanted bodies. He offered a huge amount of money to dig up graves, take the skeletons, and deliver them to him. Preceptor agreed before I could even think. I was terrified, but fear and poverty kept my mouth shut. Preceptor dug the graves. I just held the flashlight, keeping watch, grave after grave, body after body, and the money kept flowing. Then someone even darker came into our lives. A sorcerer. He didn't want skeletons. He wanted the heads of the dead, only the heads. He paid double, triple sometimes. And Preceptor didn't hesitate. Night after night we sneaked into graveyards, dug up bodies, severed heads. I knew it was wrong, but once you step into darkness, turning back becomes harder than falling deeper. One day, a respected religious scholar, a Sufi saint, called us. He looked at us with calm, tired eyes and said, "After I die, promise me something. Don't dig up my grave. Don't touch my body." He placed more money on the table than the sorcerer ever offered us. We accepted the money, and we made a promise. A year later, Sufi saint died. A few days after the burial, the sorcerer contacted us. He wanted the head of Sufi saint, and he offered an unbelievable amount of money. I refused. I argued. We promised him. But Preceptor laughed and said, "We dig graves and steal bodies. What difference will one broken promise make?" He picked up the shovel and walked toward the grave. I followed him because I always did. But that night, something inside me was breaking. When we reached the grave, my legs felt frozen. I whispered, trembling, "Preceptor, I can't touch this grave. I'll stand here." "You do it," he spat in annoyance. "Fine. Stand and watch." The shovel hit the soil. The sound echoed in the silent cemetery. My heartbeat was louder than the shovel. Finally, the grave opened, and what we saw should not have been possible. Inside the grave there were two bodies. Preceptor pulled the cloth away. One body was Sufi saint. The other was Preceptor himself. Preceptor stared at his own corpse, his own lifeless face, lying inside the grave. His hands shook, yet he forced himself to continue. He bent down, trying to cut the head of Sufi saint. The moment his blade touched the body, Sufi saint's dead hand moved. It rose, grabbed Preceptor's throat, and squeezed. A lifeless corpse choked him. Preceptor's eyes bulged. He kicked. He tried to scream. In seconds, he was dead. I screamed and fainted. When I opened my eyes, villagers were surrounding me. They asked what happened. I told them everything, but when they looked at the grave, it was untouched, perfect, smooth, as if nothing had happened. They called me crazy. They accused me of lying. I begged them to dig the grave. Finally they did, and what they found was exactly what I saw. Sufi saint hand was still wrapped around Preceptor's throat. They tried to remove preceptor body, but they couldn't separate them. It was as if even death refused to let him go. The villagers buried preceptor right there in the same grave. Sufi saint family looked at me and said, "Never do such sins again. Live honestly from this day forward." And I do. Because once you disturb the dead disturb you back. I'm about to tell you something that truly happened in our village. This isn't a rumor or a story made to entertain people. Villagers still talk about it today. There was a farmer in our village named Nick. Every morning before sunrise, he went to his field to water his crops. It took around 10 to 15 minutes to walk from his house to the field, a narrow dirt road filled with dense fog on both sides. He always carried a flashlight in his hand. But that morning, everything changed. The flashlight kept flickering. Every time he fixed it, it would turn off again. Right then, a deep voice from behind him said, "Nick, what are you doing?" Nick was bent down, working. Irritated, he replied, "Can't you see what I'm doing?" A few seconds later, the same voice, same tone, asked the same question again. Now annoyed, Nick turned around. No one was there. At that exact moment, the flashlight went off again. Suddenly, a strong jolt ran through his body, like an electric shock. Panicked, he ran back home. He told everything to his wife, and she just said, "Someone must be fun with you. There are many fields nearby." Maybe someone's voice. The next morning, Nick went to the field again, just like always. But that day, he never came back. Morning passed, then noon. Nick was nowhere to be found. Beside Nick's field, Ethan had a small nursery. While watering his plants, Ethan suddenly screamed as if something terrified him to death, and he fainted on the spot. Villagers rushed there, calling his name, but he didn't respond. Nick's younger brother finally arrived and found Nick's dead body. His body was in a horrifying condition. His head was pushed deep into the muddy soil, and his neck was unnaturally twisted. Villagers took the body home and arranged the funeral. Ethan suffered from high fever for 4 or 5 days, and he never recovered from that shock. You might think the story ends here. It doesn't. Nick's grave was made in the garden beside his house. Right next to that garden was the village road. 7 days after the burial, Thomas, the neighbor, was returning home after closing his tea shop. It was close to midnight. As he walked past the garden, his eyes accidentally shifted toward the grave. What he saw, he was never prepared for. In the beam of his flashlight, he clearly saw a huge white figure standing beside the grave, eating something. Before he could comprehend what he was seeing, the figure vanished. Terrified, he ran home and fainted. From that night on, Thomas never stayed out after sunset. A few nights later, he woke up at night to use the bathroom, flashlight in hand. As he reached near the bathroom door, he saw something strange again. The next morning, villagers found him unconscious in front of the bathroom. After he regained consciousness, Thomas said, "Inside the garden, someone wearing white clothes was calling me, floating about 10 feet above the ground." He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure slowly moved closer, revealing a horrifying face, and Thomas fell unconscious. After that night, anyone crossing that road near the grave experienced strange things. My own uncle faced something similar. While returning home, a 5-minute walk would suddenly take 2 hours, as if something wouldn't let him move away from the grave. The incidents continued. After days of fever and weakness, Thomas eventually died. During my exam days, I had to cross that same road every night. One day, a friend of mine was walking right behind me. Suddenly, he collapsed onto the road, his head forced down into his shoulders as if something was pressing it. Later, an exorcist was called. He performed rituals and sealed the grave with charms and talismans. Slowly, the incident stopped. This story is real, and the grave still exists. I've lived in this village my whole life, and I am only writing this now because I finally realized the graves have been moving again. You might think that sounds ridiculous, but I swear I'm not making this up. I know every inch of the cemetery behind our house. I grew up there. When I was a kid, we didn't have much to do. There's one shop, one bus that sometimes shows up, and an old Anglican church on the hill, St. Bartholomew's, with a graveyard that spreads out behind it like a sea of gray teeth. The house I grew up in sits right at the edge of that hill, maybe 15 meters from the first row of headstones. My mom used to say we were lucky that the dead made quiet neighbors. I used to believe her, until the night I saw one of them standing at our fence. When you grow up next to a graveyard, you will get used to a few things. The smell of wet earth after rain, the way fog seems thicker there than anywhere else, and the way names fade from the stones faster than they should. I was maybe 9 the first time I noticed it. There was a grave near the big yew tree that I always passed on my way to school. The name on it was Thomas Ellery, 1912 to 1978. I remember it because I used to trace the letters with my finger when the stone was warm from the sun. Then, one morning after a storm, the dates had changed. The name was the same, but the numbers were different. 1914 to 1980. I thought it was my memory playing tricks, but I went home and told Mom anyway. She just smiled and said, "The stones sink sometimes, love. Maybe you misread it." I didn't argue. But that grave never looked right again. The soil around it was always softer, darker, like it had been turned over recently. Fast forward to when I was 16. By then, the graveyard was more of a hangout spot than anything scary. Everyone in our age had a story about sneaking through it at night, nicking a bottle from someone's older brother, and daring each other to sit on the oldest grave until the church clock struck 12. One Friday night, my mates, Ben and Ollie, decided it was my turn. We hopped the fence just after 11. It was cold, damp, and the moon was bright enough that we didn't need torches. You could hear the sheep moving on the far side of the hill and the church weather vane creaking. I was supposed to sit on the oldest grave, the one under the yew tree, for 10 minutes. Just 10. Ben set his phone timer, and I sat down. At first, it was fine. I could see their silhouettes a few meters away, laughing quietly. The stone under me was cold and slick. But about halfway through, I realized something was wrong with the tree behind me. The branches weren't moving with the wind. They were trembling, as if something beneath the soil was shaking them. Then I heard it. A sound like someone taking a deep breath through damp fabric. I turned, expecting to see one of the lads trying to scare me, but there was no one there, just the row of headstones stretching back into the dark. The timer on Ben's phone went off. I nearly tripped running back to them. They swore they hadn't moved an inch. After that night, I stopped going near the graveyard. Not out of fear, not exactly. It was more like I could feel something whenever I was close. The air got thicker. The silence felt too deep. Sometimes, when I was in the kitchen at night, I'd look out the window and swear I could see fresh dirt mounded up where it hadn't been that morning. Mum passed away the next year. It was quick. Heart failure. We buried her near the front row, just a few steps from our garden fence. After the funeral, I started noticing other small changes. The path through the graveyard seemed shorter. Some graves that used to be near the church were now closer to our property. I even found boot prints once, heavy ones, leading from a patch of freshly dug soil right up to our back gate. I asked the groundskeeper about it, an old bloke named Harris who'd been there for decades. He looked tired. "Things shift in the ground," he said. "Always have." But the way he said it didn't sound like he believed it. I moved away for university not long after. Didn't come back much, just holidays. It was about 3 years later when I first saw the photos. Dad had been struggling since Mum died, and he called me one night, drunk, slurring, saying, "They're getting closer." When I asked what he meant, he sent me a picture from his phone. It was the view from our kitchen window, the cemetery fence, same as always. Only now the grave seemed right up against it. I thought it was just perspective, maybe zoomed in too far. Then he sent another one from a month later. The same view, but this time the fence was bent inward, like the ground beneath it had shifted. And behind it, the yew tree grave looked fresh again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I zoomed in on the photo until the pixels blurred. There was something, or someone, standing near the tree, tall, pale. Too far to see details, but its face looked blank. Dad died 6 months later. They said heart attack, same as Mum. I didn't plan to move back, but I didn't have much choice. The house was mine, and selling it would have taken too long. So I came home. The graveyard looked the same, but emptier somehow. Some of the stones I remembered as a kid were gone. Others, new ones, had names I didn't recognize. That first night, I barely slept. The wind made the fence creak, and the church bell rang twice after midnight, even though it hadn't worked in years. I went outside with a torch. The grass was soaked, the air heavy with that wet clay smell. Then I saw it, a patch of freshly turned soil right beside our fence. No headstone yet, just a wooden marker with a name scrawled on it in chalk. It said, David H. The rest was smudged. That's my name. I froze, couldn't breathe. It looked new, like it had been written that day. When I went back in the morning, it was gone. No soil, no marker, just grass. I tried finding Harris, the old caretaker, to ask what the hell was happening. The vicar said he'd retired last year, moved to Devon. The new caretaker was younger, maybe 40. And when I mentioned the grave by the fence, his face went pale. He told me quietly, "You shouldn't live here alone." Then he turned and walked away before I could ask anything else. That night, I set up a camera facing the cemetery, just my phone, propped against the window, recording overnight. At 2:47 a.m., it caught movement. A figure walked slowly between the graves, tall, wearing what looked like a long coat. It stopped at the fence and stood there for almost 10 minutes, facing the house. Then it turned and walked back toward the yew tree. I paused the video there, because right before it turned, it looked straight at the camera, and the face, I swear on everything, looked exactly like mine. Over the next few weeks, things changed faster. The land behind the house started sinking. Graves that used to be level were tilted forward, the names half buried. I tried to take photos, but they never came out right. The images blurred or showed things that weren't there. Extra shadows, doubled stones. The church finally closed last winter. No more services, no caretaker. Now, no one goes up there but me. Last week, I went to visit Mum's grave, except I couldn't find it. The spot I knew it was in, right by the fence, was empty. No marker, no sign. Just fresh earth, dark and wet, shaped like a rectangle.